So I thought we'd do a little look. This is some of the trees. I've moved them around a bunch. This is just Trembling Aspen forest. Populus tremulatus, I think it is. And it's just the canopy's filling out so nice. Nice big long trunks. I've spray painted the base. And this year what's nice is that these roots, I kind of was able to start to show some of these roots. And that just gives it a nice feel, like, you know, down here more like a forest floor. And, you know, I could get the moss out and really try to do it up nice, but I haven't really got it ready. And so that's sort of display mode. And like I said, I spray painted that wood, and it just makes it look so much nicer. Quick little spray can. I actually did it. I had some cardboard and I just, you know, moved it off here, but I put cardboard here and just spray painted it. You know, so super easy to get can of spray paint and do that. You know, just makes your wood boxes look so much nicer. But yeah, the canopy's just really filling out. Basically what I've done is I've, you know, they were up here, trimmed them down. You could call it a pinching almost, but like a longer pinch. I just sort of pinched the silhouette, mostly trying to push some growth down lower. And then these lower ones I've just let grow, because like you can see, this has 2 branches. You know, there's just not many branches here, so you know, at some point I could wire these out a bit more, make some space, but you know, I like seeing these, that little hole there, and it really just has this feeling of rising up, sort of tall trembling aspen. That's how I often, when I see trembling aspens, I feel like there's, in nature, there's just these long, sort of spindly, not spindly, but long trunks. And you know, I've been working on a trembling aspen forest for a while, and had one in a much smaller container and smaller ones, and this is just, man, I just love this. And some bonsai, you know, have a personal feel to them. This is one of those trees for me. You know, I grew up with trembling aspen forests around, pockets of them, you know, and they're the one organism. They're called colony tree, anyways, where it's all one tree. Now these aren't all one tree, but in nature they are. So it's just like they shoot up new trees, and it's all connected. But yeah, for me, you know, it was this vague image I had 3-4 years ago. I was sort of rooting through my memory of trees and what I had in my past, and it's this sort of vague imagery of like looking up and these really tall trunks, almost dinosaur-like feel, in and amongst a bunch of conifers. We had some cottonwood also, in and amongst, and some birch was the other one. But yeah, like I said, it was just this certain feel in the way when the wind moves and all the leaves, you know, tremble. Norway maple, we saw that last video. Yeah, this is like a little local willow. I'll show you what I did to it this spring. So this is a native willow. It's not like a weeping willow, and I think it might be classified as sort of a shrub. Didn't style it last year at all. You know, took a bunch of, there was some dead wood around, and like, so it got quite a bit of dieback, and you know, like new little shoots here, and it's yeah, it's shooting out. Now's the time, if anything. So I had to be really delicate with the buds. And then, you know, I kind of want it to be clean design, but I'm having a little bit of a hard time imagining like how I can, you know, if these are all just like leaves and which one's coming to, you know, and that. So I'm gonna let the tree respond. And, you know, I have one quite strange line here that goes in and behind. You can see that branch back there, and that's to give it some depth. I really only had this branch, which is one, this branch, and this branch. So, you know, 4, well, apexy type zone, and then, you know, 4 branches, and then this one. And so, you know, I thought about, this feels like a lot too much. You know, it's because it's not like a thick design. I don't need tons of branching on this. And I had a nice little one here that was great, and so that broke up this empty space. So I'm hoping that branch will do that a bit. And as you can see, it's it's coming out really nice, and I have trimmed it a little bit again, just to keep it into shape. You know, there's a branch coming out here. I took that off, but it's just coming along nice, like these little sort of almost pads, and you know, kind of a funky. So it came up like this, and this was growing here. Obviously, at some point, some other branch had been here, and I wired this. And you can see the scar marks aren't horrible, right? They're there, but it's kind of growing over. It just looks like marks, and luckily it wasn't, you know, the candy cane. So that's something to think about when you're wiring. You can see that I've, you know, there's a classic sort of candy cane scar mark. These ones are a little more flat, round, so it's just a little different. But yeah, this funky bend comes up towards you and then curves off, but just what a great, like, you know, this is a, like I said, a local willow, salix of some sort, and you know, it was thin and just grows so fast and vigorous, and it's a nice little pond. This doesn't get hardly any sun down here, and so I managed to get this moss on here. It's just this nice emerald green. Yeah, it's interesting. I think bonsai in the West is going through a change. It's you know, I can think of Bjorn leaving back for Japan, and then of course Ryan Neal sort of switching to this to the app, to the mobile app versus Murray Live, and switching where he's at, and his sort of, it seems like he's going through this change of going back into the garden and watering and building out his collection and his, you know, his collection of art, I guess you call it, right? And spending time in the garden, watering more and more with the trees, a little less on the business side. I'm feeling that, you know, so he's taking on more of those responsibilities. But I also think that's just maybe his original vision of what he thought of himself as doing as a bonsai master, getting back to that. And he's just been pushing so hard on the online content, and how much appreciation and love can we send that guy? That's like, what he did for bonsai in the West is hard to even quantify. I know for me personally, like, changed the way I saw bonsai, but also just all the techniques, you know, empowered me to eventually build the collections and work with the Yamidori trees. And particularly, I think one of the things that he really contributes is the knowledge of biology and just individual tree species health and knowledge. Is that difference between like traditional bonsai, classic bonsai, and like Western bonsai, or a miniature in nature style, right? And so knowing what trees look like in nature, and then trying to replicate that. And that's, you know, like when you first start bonsai, when I did too, it's like, you know, the little trees that you see in the malls, and it's like that is bonsai, and then you kind of just go down the rabbit hole and then realize it. But you know, I would have seen some trees that Ryan style at some point. I don't get it, and so, you know, being able to train my mind, okay, what are trees in nature looking like, how's that working, and building that artistic ability to even just see that kind of beauty. So much love and so much appreciation for that guy. Like, he transformed bonsai in the West, and definitely for myself, so lots of love towards him. But then in this changing nature of it, you know, you have Bjorn also back in Japan now. You know, when I started watching videos, he was he's in Japan doing his vlogs, and then he came over, started his whole Nashville thing, built his bonsai garden there, put on online content. Like, again, so much appreciation and love, and what he's done for Western bonsai. I think it's just so great. So yeah, those two heroes for sure. But yeah, now he's back in Japan, and so this feels like this another phase of bonsai in the West and bonsai on YouTube, bonsai in this sort of digital world, because, you know, there's sort of a whole history of bonsai that just happens in clubs, knowledge that gets passed. But then, you know, right when I started, I guess maybe like 6 years ago, and probably a few years before that, bonsai was just really getting out there. But when I started watching, I basically watched all the YouTube videos, like, you know, it's lots and lots of hours, but now there's no way you could watch all the channels, right? And people have come and gone, you know, and I'm just realizing for myself, there's this cycle of bonsai. And I'm at this place now where I have collected a whole bunch, and I love collecting. That's kind of a sweet spot for me, is collecting. And I would love to have, you know, probably 50, 60 trees, and then just have a whole huge collecting field where I make pre-bonsai into, you know, well, I make trees into pre-bonsai, and then would just sell them off, because I just love collecting those, initially styling. It's very exciting and it's very creative in a lot of ways. And then have like 60 good trees, but yeah, I've got way more than that right now in containers, and it's too many. Like I said, I'm not getting enough time to work on the nicer trees, and as they grow, they ramify, and they take hours versus, you know, before you can just grab a tree, style it, and then it's quite next year just trim it. But as they get bigger and bigger, they take more and more, to where you're hours and hours on every tree. And so, you know, I think all bonsai professionals go through these cycles, or all bonsai practitioners go through these cycles. And so I'm at one of those cycles now where everything's getting ramified, and so I'm learning, you know, like I said in my other video, I got to learn to pinch and keep them compact, trim at the right time, keep on them so they don't grow out. It's just a lot. Like I said, it's just a lot more work. But even thinking of the history of cycles, you know, in the West, and even in bonsai YouTube world, you know, digital world of bonsai, you know, you have Walter Paul and Dan Robinson, who are, you know, those pioneers in non-traditional form, right? And just bringing a sort of artistic level, and then, you know, Ryan got to stand on the shoulders of those two guys. The great book is Dan Robinson's book, Gnarled Trees and Branch. I can't remember quite what it is, but it's like a history of his sort of journey too, as well as certain trees that are highlighted. But those guys really brought a new feel to bonsai, in that sort of more versus the sort of traditional sense. And then I think Ryan Neal's sort of standing on those shoulders and reaching out even farther. But yeah, you know, you think back in the day, like it's the world of bonsai. The guy from Australia, maybe New Zealand, I can't remember. But just the sound of those videos and the way he goes about it, it's like so nostalgic for me. It just brings back, like, cause that was the start. That was like excitement, where I get a tree, put it in the pot, wire it all the same day, transplant it, and just love it. You know, it's the funniest looking tree you ever seen, and there's so much joy in that now, or then, and now I just, you know, it's just funny to think back. So simply going through that sort of development of, you know, getting better trees that require more work, and my appreciation for certain species, for certain pieces as grows. And so it's just that those next, I mean, this is probably what any sort of artist or craftsman goes through in their development. And so it's just the same, right? It's these cycles you go through as a practitioner. But yeah, and I mean, how many YouTubers have sort of come and gone in the whole process, right? It's good on for those that have stayed. And just the world is just changing, and it's so great. I mean, we're getting some great videos. You got Jan Kulik's videos coming out these days. There's you know, it's too bad, like Peter Warren was doing a bunch of good videos there for a while, long format, and just walking through all things bonsai, and they were so good. And he's recently stopped, well, not recently, a year ago or something. But like I said, you got Jan Kulik out there doing some good stuff. Yeah, and gosh, I want to say, where is he? Is he in Greece? There's Majorca Bonsai, which is great too. Africano, I can't remember the name of it, but he's got great videos too, just high quality, spends time in it. Looks like he's gonna have an amazing collection. I'd love to see a tour of his collection. But yeah, and I mean, if you haven't, go to Mirai Live and pay he's got even a reduced fee for his library collection. I think it's like $10 or something a month. And just start going through videos. I mean, just spending time listening to him. I recommend at the start, because you're at the start of his journey. He's only going to repeat himself so many times on certain pieces, and so I'd go back to the very start and watch the early ones, just because you get his development. There's a bit of refinement, like he's changed some of his opinions about things, he's gained more knowledge, of course, but for the most part, it's really good content. You'll learn so much. Yeah, and on the Walter Paul piece, go check out just YouTube Walter Paul. More just the way he talks about bonsai. You know, this is something I've always sort of struggled with. You know, I've had formal upright, cascade, you know, semi cascade, you know, all the styles. And then we, you know, it's like first branch, where's the scar, you know, we have all these sort of rules. And this was, I think this was a needed step in Western bonsai, but maybe misguided in some ways. It's not the way to appreciate an art. And I know when I started, I've actually had to untrain myself from that. Not only looking at that, but looking at, you know, maybe some of the traditional standards that you're taught, like really flat paths and where certain branches are, and you know, the rules, like how big is the trunk to the bonsai container and all that stuff. Bar branches and certain, you know, pigeon breasts and things like that. And, you know, so I've been training my mind out of that and out of the sort of, you know, what do you call that? Out of the original way you're taught initially, the rules of bonsai. You know, to see fine lines and to try to change the language that I'm using. This tree is a quiet tree, or this tree is a majestic tree, or this tree is a bold tree, or it has a lot of like tension within the tree, or it's, you know, gnarled tree, but you know, scary or spooky tree. That's all Walter Paul stuff, right? That idea of those deciduous that just have like that feel to them, and I think that's how we should be practicing. Right? I think it should, you know, there's all the ways to you know, the technique to use wire and all that, but then I think ultimately we need to be starting to look at like, you know, a new language, probably the language that other artists would use to describe certain trees, because, you know, as we talk about them, that changes the lens that we see them through, and you need a repertoire of images to start seeing other pieces. And so, you know, but so I like the idea of, like I said, a tree with honor, or a tree that, you know, or even just an old tree, ancient tree, a master tree. Yeah, you know, you can imagine, I mean, even just the idea of like a tree in the winter with snow, tree in this versus, you know, tree that's been rained on, or tree in a forest, or tree out in the plains, or on a ledge. You know, it's a new way to think about trees, and to sort of reach a different essence, a different artistic appreciation for them. Because, you know, part of the big part for me is learning how to appreciate trees, like what to think of them, what do I see, how do I even know what I'm looking at. And actually I love, you know, nature's so beautiful, but I love the hand of man. I love not seeing it in that, like, you know, it's like super all done up, but I actually like some of the Japanese aesthetic that way, where there's some appreciation for the input of the human on it, and capturing the human form of a tree, a digestible form of the tree. When you have these ancient creatures that are so big, it's hard for our eyes to even take in a tree and into itself. It has to be quite far away, otherwise your eye just zooms around. And so I actually like, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, there's the guy that said, oh, bonsai is an illusion, or it's a magic trick, because you know, you're not just taking the exact tree and branch for branch, it's just chaos, right? And so we're using branches strategically to create a certain feel to the tree, but also to give an image of the tree, you know, because if you can get the whole image of the tree as a one piece, there's something really nice about that. You know, you're always kind of focusing somewhere, but your eye isn't drawn to, say, a abnormal piece, or some piece. But I mean, the other idea is that, you know, you're taken through the tree. You know, you want the trunk base, well, not always, but the base to draw you, you know, to be drawn in and move up the trunk and see the sort of branching that comes off as they carry up and move your way up, as a sort of way of like looking at a tree. And so it just, you know, then it doesn't pull you out and push you back in. And so you're actually taken on a journey as you're looking at the piece, or looking at the tree. And so then, you know, as part of the artist, or part of the the hand of man is guiding that approach, that way of knowing how the viewer is going to actually see the tree. You know, you can only do that with certain kinds of trees, and there's only so much you can do. But there's definitely tricks to all that. I mean, other people, you know, these are just thoughts that I have. But the same thing, like, can I get a tree to droop so far down that it's like alpine, subalpine. Like when you look at those subalpine firs, they are just drooping down, 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 down. And it has this really nice feel. And you have to have seen that, though, otherwise it might start to look strange in some ways. And so, you know, for me, it's that's where I'm getting to, right? It's like, how do I make a subalpine fir look like it's in the subalpine? Or how do I make a, you know, like a sort of wind-induced tree? And of course, then I'm doing like a lot of like very traditional, and so much of the tree is styling itself. You know, not crossing branches and having branches, you know, come off where they located on the tree and come down.